Hi, I'm Lori Allred. Welcome to Inspired by Pinterest, where I browse around Pinterest looking for amazing pins, resources, ideas from bloggers and crafters from all over the world, and bring them to life each week here on my craft channel. Today is the second part of our weaving episode. Last week, if you missed it, I talk about looms and what you need to get started. Everything from what you can purchase to what you can make at home. So now that we've got that going, we're ready to actually start weaving. It's super simple, but first let's visit my pin board and a couple of pins I wanted to share with you. My pin board is just weaving DIY, and as always, all the pins I mention and links can be found on my blog at allreddesign.net. The first pin I want to reference was probably one of my favorite resources when I started. It's from a website called abeautifulmess.com, and they have a great tutorial on there on how to get started, and she even shows you a really fun technique called a raya knot, which I'm going to show you here in a little bit. Another one that I really loved was honestlywtf.com. She does a great tutorial on there as well. So I researched a lot. I watched a lot of videos. In fact, the next link I'm going to give you is from creativebug.com. They have an actual, it's pretty lengthy. The first part is an hour and a half, and the second part's probably about that long as well. But they have a really amazing designer called Annabelle, I think it's Wrigley or Wakely. I apologize, I got that wrong. But she does a beautiful job. She's from Australia and shows you some really fun techniques. And she uses a handmade, something she made at home loom like this one where we added the nails to a canvas board. And then she uses a fork, an actual fork, to beat down her weave. So I loved what I learned from that. It does take some time to go through it. And then of course, I'm going to show you a couple of links of things I want to learn next, but I haven't had time. They are more advanced techniques and they're beautiful. One is from Hello Hydrangea, and she has great tutorials on weaving as well. Beautiful tapestries. And this one I want to do that I'm showing you the image of is called a looped raya, and I'm excited to give that a try. And then the last one is a really cool concept called card weaving. It's if you want to do a continuous weave, a lot of guitar straps or camera straps you've seen are done this way. That's on my bucket list to figure out one day. So like I mentioned in last week's episode, you're going to want to start with a loom, whether it's wrapped around a frame loom, one you've purchased or one you've made. And then you're going to need just some basic tools, your scissors. You'll want to have a needle of sorts. I have some yarn needles that work great. I actually prefer the tapestry needles. Hard to see against that, but it has a bit of a bent and it's blunt on the end. This one's my favorite, and I have a little bit bigger one on one of my pieces. I think this one right here shows the larger one, and this one is great for picking up because you're going to go over and under. This one is my favorite, and I'd be sad if I lost that one. And then of course you're going to need a fork, whether it's one that came with the loom or an actual fork that you have at home. They both do the same thing. A shed stick is really helpful as well. A shed stick's usually inserted into the weave to go over and under, to lift one of the portions, meaning that instead of having to go over and under, when I pull this down towards, I can just slide my needle through. Since this is a smaller loom, we don't have one that does both versions, so one side you're going to have to go over and under, and the next you can slide it through. I really like using the shed stick. Now the shuttles, I don't use these are way too big. I think you can wrap yarn around it and feed it through. They do have smaller ones. I have a wood needle that works really well also, and then they have these really cool bobbins that you can get that I haven't found that I needed yet. I haven't gotten to the more advanced weaving yet. So the other thing I like to start with is sometimes I did this wrong on this one. I didn't leave any room at the bottom to finish this, so it became somewhat of a challenge to finish off my weave. It still worked. I had to push everything down. Everything I did wrong I learned on my first one. So watching one of my tutorials, she said she just puts a piece of cardboard in here so that she has something to beat the weave down against, and then she has extra space at the end of her weaving to finish it off in a really simple manner. So just weave that in so you have a portion to start. So basically your tapestry will go that portion up. So I did the same thing. You can't see, let's see if you can see under this one. I did put a piece of cardboard under this one so that when I go to pull this off the loom, I have all of these extra pieces on here, and makes it really easy to finish that off. There's a couple of different techniques. So I highly recommend that little piece of cardboard. It makes a huge difference. And then of course you're going to want to have your weft yarn, which is whatever yarn you're going back and forth with. So here's the key. The thicker the yarn, the nice, beautiful, chunky part looks like this. The smaller the yarn, it's going to look much tighter. So it's just a preference thing, whichever you prefer. And you'll find doing these different types of designs becomes almost second nature. It's really easy to do. On this one, I was having a lot of fun doing the kind of back and forth and no real rhyme or reason to what I was doing, but I was having a lot of fun. And I did use the thinner yarn along with that thicker, more textured yarn. That's what I love, is mixing the textures. So you're always going to start from left to right. So we'll start by, I always do about an arm's length doubled. It's a preference thing. And then let's go ahead and use my yarn needle for sake of example so you can see it. And then pull that down about so you have a little bit of room. And I always like to, there's a couple of different ways to start. Sometimes I would never start on the end. You don't want your pieces hanging off the side. I did do that on my first one. So I usually start about the middle, so coming up. And you remember, you're always going over and under, and then you'll go back the opposite way. So just going to go over and under to get me started. Now I'm going to go back this way. I'm going to wrap around that outside one and go over and under again. Again, I can use, oh, not yet. I can use it on the next round. So make sure you're going over and under. And you can catch yourself when you make mistakes. It's really easy to pull it out and start over. Now here's the key. You have to create what some of the bloggers mentioned as a rainbow. You want to create a bit of an arch, and then take your beat stick or fork and just push it down. The reason you want to create the arch is so that you can give yourself, it doesn't create unnecessary tension. What happens if you don't do that, and I learned this the hard way, is your weaving starts to become very narrow on the insides, and it pulls in. See, I got a little aggressive towards the top. Of course, I go from wider to narrower. So by doing this arch, it helps prevent that, and it gives it just enough. And don't worry if it's not looking gorgeous at the beginning. Just keep going. Pretty soon you'll see it come together. It's pretty simple, and really this is probably one of my favorite things to do now in front of the TV, because it's easy. I don't really have to think much about it. I don't follow a pattern. See, a fork works great too. And this is called beating down your weave, and you want it depending on how tight it is. This one is really tight on this example, and so it's really hard to beat. And I lost a little bit of control on the width as I got further up. It was harder for me to beat down that weave because I wasn't really pushing it against this bottom portion, which you kind of learn as you go, which I'm okay with because it's still been a really fun process for me. And I can't wait. Hopefully I'll have that finished and posted on my blog when you go visit it. This is, I think, better than knitting or crocheting, people. It's way fun. Although my daughter goes, "What are you going to do with them?" I don't know. Hang them everywhere. Give them as gifts. I don't know. You can have a lot of fun with that. So just keep going back and forth until you get to the desired length. Now, if you want to start another color or you run out of yarn, do the same thing. Drop it in the middle behind. So I'll show you an example. We'll finish this one. I almost wished I'd had a bit of I didn't figure this out until this morning. My son, I can't remember his name. My son has this just art easel that I went and grabbed. I would have actually preferred that sitting at a table sometimes, because after a while it got kind of to be a pain on my lap. So let's say we're running out of yarn or we want to start on a new color. You're going to want to end it in the middle but drop it down underneath the design. So I'm not going to come back up to the top. Still beat it down like you would a normal. And then let's just leave that strand in the back. Grab your other yarn. Let's just take some of this yarn. And come up in that same spot that you dropped down. And then when you go to clean up the back side of your weaving, you can just tie those together. Or a lot of people will finish. So I'm going to come back up where I would have with that peach color. Now it's going to be hard to notice any huge difference just because they're so different in thicknesses. But as you go back and forth and keep adding to this design, it's going to come together really nicely. So remember, keep an arch so that you're not pulling it too tight on the edges, and just keep going back and forth. Now my next thing I want to show you, which I had a lot of fun with, and it's really trendy right now with tapestries, is the Raya knot, and that's what gives my pretty fringe on this example here. It's also how I did the fringe on here and here. Super easy. I've read up a couple techniques and watched some different YouTube videos, and you know, there's some techniques I like better than others. So we're just going to tuck this under here. And we're going to, so probably my favorite technique is the one that the Creative Bug, I learned from Creative Bug. So she takes a ton, if you want them long like that, she does this arm thing. It's the fastest way to do it. It's good exercise. I'm sure I'm getting points. So just cut it up here. This is if you want them to be this long. Mine, this example, I'm going to do half that. And then take about 3 strands is all, super easy. Now the easiest way I've learned, and I've tried them all, to do a Raya knot is to put the center of these strands on the thread. Now you're going to do it over 2. So you're going to put it over 2, and then you're going to take the outside, wrap it under, wrap this one under, and I'll show you, don't worry, I'll show you a couple examples. Pull it up to tighten it, and then down to position. Super easy to do. Some others tell you to push it through, like it's just silly. This is probably my favorite way of doing it. So again, put it over those 2, loop the outside around, loop this side around. My fat fingers, pull up to tighten and then down into position. And now I would do this, so I would do this all the way across, and then I'd probably do another row, and then I would alternate. So I would pull these 2 together to keep my weave straight, and then it'll give it a really nice fringe on the bottom. And the fun part is once you've added the fringe, you can go and make it so it's pointed, you can make it arched along the bottom. These I tried to get all cool and technical with my Fiskars scissors and kind of go down into a point here. You can have a lot of fun with those. So this is a really fun technique. It's really popular. You could do a whole weave of just different Raya knots coming down in different colors. So hopefully you will try your hand at weaving and enjoy a new craft. And I'm glad I got the opportunity to introduce it to you, and thank you for joining me. We'll see you next week here on my craft channel.